We will visit a side of Hollywood that remains largely obscured by the golden glow of nostalgia. While America has long held up the golden age of Hollywood as a paragon of glamour and artistic achievement, recent revelations and decades-old industry whispers tell a far darker tale. Behind the iconic smiles and dashing tuxedos, many of the era's most beloved male stars began their journeys not with lucky auditions or studio deals, but in the shadows, working as companions, escorts, and survivalists in a city that offered no safety net for struggling young talent. The rigid studio system of the 1930s through the 1960s exercised near total control over image, narrative, and publicity, while maintaining a chilling silence about the realities facing many of its actors. For young men without money, connections, or family support, the dream of stardom often came with a disturbing catch. In exchange for a shot at a screen test or an influential introduction, they were expected to provide companionship to wealthy studio insiders, producers, or so-called benefactors, often under the veil of secrecy. These arrangements were not rare exceptions. They were systemic, normalized by powerful agents and a silent code of survival. What emerges then is a picture of an entertainment industry that, while producing timeless legends, was also structured around an undercurrent of exploitation, where ambition was exploited and vulnerability weaponized. While the fan magazines spoke of fairy tales, the streets of Los Angeles often told a different story, one of desperation, quiet endurance, and hidden trauma. It is in this shadow that our report begins. Let us begin with one of the most iconic leading men of the 20th century, Rock Hudson. Known to audiences as the embodiment of American masculinity, Hudson's chiseled jaw and quiet stoicism graced countless silver screens. But prior to his rise, he was simply Roy Fitzgerald, a truck driver from Illinois with dreams too big for his wallet. His transformation into Rock Hudson came at the hands of Hollywood's most notorious star maker, Henry Wilson. Wilson, who specialized in creating heartthrobs, was equally infamous for operating within a shadow system that blurred professional management with personal exploitation. According to numerous biographers and industry insiders, Hudson's early years in Los Angeles were characterized by his participation in a hidden economy, attending private parties where companionship was quietly exchanged for connections, favors, and the possibility of stardom. These gatherings were not frivolous soirees, but functioned as clandestine auditions, where young men were effectively tested not for roles, but for pliability. Hudson's charisma and looks opened doors, but his survival was predicated on his willingness to play along in a game where the rules were never written but universally understood. While his later fame allowed him to step out of this world, the foundations of his career were undeniably laid in its shadows. The case of Rock Hudson demonstrates how, in post-war Hollywood, sexuality, power, and ambition collided behind velvet drapes, forming a transactional environment that studios profited from, agents orchestrated, and young actors were left to navigate alone. If there was one man who embodied the undercurrent of Golden Age Hollywood's hidden economy, it was Scotty Bowers. Far from being just a Hollywood hustler, Bowers operated a highly sophisticated, if unofficial, network of companionship services that catered to the elite of the entertainment industry. Beginning his operation from a humble gas station on Hollywood Boulevard in the late 1940s, Bowers' reach extended across the highest echelons of studio power. In his candid memoir, Full Service, Bowers detailed how he facilitated encounters between struggling young men, often aspiring actors, and producers, stars, or studio executives who had the money and power to change lives. His account has been partially corroborated by other biographers and supported by decades of whispered testimonies from those who saw the reality behind the curtain. What makes Bowers unique is not just his role in the system, but his audacious transparency later in life. He did not merely participate, he built a livelihood out of Hollywood's most guarded secret and lived to tell the tale. Bowers' testimony reveals a world in which bodies were currency, and secrets were the unspoken language of the trade. The glitz of the Golden Age was, in part, maintained by individuals like Bowers, men who understood that access was power, and that survival, for many, required participation in a system few dared to name. His story forces us to confront the sanitized mythology of old Hollywood with the grittier, more human truths that shaped it behind closed doors. Next, we turn to a figure whose life and death encapsulate the darkest consequences of Hollywood's hidden culture. Ramon Novarro. Born Jose Ramon Gil Samaniego, Novarro rose to prominence during the silent film era as a romantic lead celebrated for his exotic charm and brooding presence. But before stardom, his life in Hollywood was defined by desperation. Historical accounts, biographical texts, and persistent rumors suggest that Novarro, like many of his peers, survived by offering private companionship to wealthy patrons, an arrangement that was more necessity than scandal during his early years in Los Angeles. These dealings were discreet, often arranged through back-channel networks, and facilitated by the understanding that talent alone was rarely enough to pay rent. Tragically, Novarro's past may have directly contributed to his untimely death in 1968, when he was brutally murdered by two men he had reportedly met in a context that echoed his earlier survival strategies. The incident sent shockwaves through the industry, exposing the grim underside of a system that left so many vulnerable and alone. Novarro's story is not just one of talent lost, but of a system that commodified beauty and punished those who bore its burdens in silence. His legacy forces us to reevaluate our understanding of Hollywood's glamour, reminding us that the price of fame was often paid in private and that some scars never made it to the screen. As we explore further, George Nader's name surfaces as yet another example of the hidden toll exacted by Hollywood's unofficial economy. A close friend and rumored confidant of Rock Hudson, Nader was also part of Henry Wilson's stable of promising young men, an arrangement that, for many, was as much about personal compromise as it was about professional advancement. While his clean-cut image suggested a conventional rise to fame, many insiders tell a different story. Before his breakout roles, Nader reportedly attended exclusive parties where favors and introductions were often predicated on unspoken agreements in which intimacy and opportunity became dangerously entwined. These private gatherings, though never officially sanctioned, were an open secret among agents, producers, and young actors seeking a foothold in the industry. Nader's success, like many others, seemed less the result of auditions and more the product of selective grooming, timed appearances, and strategic companionship. Later in life, his unwavering discretion fueled speculation that he had learned early how to navigate the fine line between public persona and private necessity. The silence surrounding his early years underscores the deeply embedded culture of coded survival strategies that defined post-war Hollywood. Nader's life, viewed through this lens, offers more than just another tale of stardom. It reveals the insidious expectation placed on actors to sacrifice identity, integrity, and even safety in pursuit of visibility, and to do so without acknowledgement, apology, or recognition of the system that demanded it. When Sal Mineo burst onto the screen in Rebel Without a Cause, he was heralded as the voice of a new generation, vulnerable, raw, and electric. But behind his rapid ascent was a personal history riddled with secrecy and survival instincts honed in Hollywood's darker corners. Numerous accounts suggest that before fame found him, Mineo was deeply entangled in the city's hidden economy, engaging in private companionship work to support himself in a town where talent often took a back seat to who you knew and what you were willing to do to get there. Even as his star rose, the specter of his past loomed large. He was never fully able to escape the stigma or danger associated with that double life. Unlike others who successfully buried their early compromises, Mineo's persona remained tinged with tension, and whispers of his early survival choices followed him throughout his career. His tragic and mysterious murder in 1976 only deepened the intrigue and cemented him as a cautionary figure in the annals of Hollywood mythos. Investigators and commentators alike speculated on the nature of the encounter that led to his death, connecting it to the same kinds of high-risk arrangements that had once sustained him. Mineo's story is ultimately a reflection of Hollywood's selective morality, a place that celebrated beauty and youth while exploiting both, offering dreams that required silence in exchange for survival. His legacy reminds us that behind every breakout performance lies a deeper truth, one that is rarely captured in press clippings or remembered on the red carpet. Montgomery Clift, with his haunted eyes and magnetic presence, became one of the most revered actors of his generation, known for bringing depth and vulnerability to the screen long before it was fashionable. But what audiences saw as emotional brilliance was, in part, a reflection of Clift's real-life hardships, many of which stemmed from his early years as a struggling actor in New York and Los Angeles. Biographers and friends have long hinted at a period when Clift, pressed by financial instability and the punishing demands of a homophobic, image image-obsessed industry, engaged in arrangements that blurred the boundaries between companionship and survival. Unlike others who played the game strategically, Clift seemed to carry the weight of every compromise he made. His performances were infused with the grief of concessions no contract could name. His reliance on private encounters, late-night arrangements, and rumored favors was reportedly driven not by indulgence but necessity, framed by a cultural environment that left little room for truth or vulnerability. Studio handlers worked overtime to protect his image, even as Clift's personal life unraveled under the pressure of keeping secrets and sustaining appearances. His post-accident decline is often viewed through a lens of physical trauma, but it may also reflect the internal toll exacted by a career built on forced silence and emotional isolation. In Clift's story, we find not just the cost of fame, but the human price of surviving in an industry that demanded masks while punishing the people behind them. His legacy endures, not despite the darkness, but because of how unforgettably it shaped his light. Anthony Perkins became immortalized in American cinema as Norman Bates in Hitchcock's Psycho, but the real horror in his life had less to do with fictional shower scenes and more with the quiet compromises he endured before reaching the screen. Perkins, described by many as sensitive, introverted, and intensely private, arrived in Hollywood at a time when identity, especially queer identity, was something to be hidden, negotiated, and at times sold. Insiders and researchers alike have pointed to a phase in Perkins's life where, much like many of his contemporaries, he survived through discreet encounters, often arranged via behind-the-scenes power brokers who knew exactly what was on offer. These arrangements, while rarely documented, were commonly accepted as a kind of unspoken rite of passage for struggling actors. Perkins' early relationships, the nature of his social circles, and his career trajectory all suggest that he learned to walk a tightrope of visibility and concealment, leveraging charm and ambiguity while hiding the financial and emotional precariousness that shaped his reality. His lifelong struggle to reconcile public image with private truth manifested in his work. Characters who were tense, conflicted, always on the brink. While his talent earned him fame, it was Perkins's ability to wear the mask convincingly, both on screen and off, that ensured his survival. Yet that survival came at a cost. The emotional toll of maintaining a carefully managed facade while quietly carrying the scars of early compromises and societal repression is central to understanding not just the actor, but the man. Perkins's life is a chilling reminder of how Hollywood's brightest stars often cast the deepest shadows. Tab Hunter was the quintessential 1950s American heartthrob, blonde, blue-eyed, and seemingly plucked from the pages of a teen magazine. But behind the polished image was a young man navigating an unrelenting system of secrecy, coercion, and personal compromise. In his memoir, Tab Hunter Confidential, Hunter bravely peeled back the curtain on his early years in Hollywood, detailing the immense pressure to maintain not just a squeaky clean public persona, but also to keep his identity and his survival strategies under wraps. Like so many others under the management of Henry Wilson, Hunter was introduced to a carefully curated pipeline of private parties and wealthy benefactors, many of whom expected more than polite conversation in return for their influence. These networking events often served as thinly veiled auditions, not for roles, but for discretion and availability. While Hunter never divulged the most explicit details or named names, the implications in his story are clear. In an era when being openly gay could destroy a career, young men were often forced to make silent bargains in order to stay afloat. Hunter's good looks opened doors, but those same looks also made him vulnerable to a system that commodified beauty and demanded submission. He survived the experience with remarkable grace, achieving stardom and later reclaiming his narrative through honesty and self-reflection. But his story is not just one of resilience. It is a sobering testament to the moral compromises young men were expected to make in order to chase their dream. In the golden age of Hollywood, Hunter's megawatt smile masked a complex reality, a life of calculated silence, painful decisions, and ultimately, hard-won freedom. Long before the rise of Rock Hudson or Montgomery Clift, there was Rudolph Valentino, the original Latin lover, a silent film icon whose smoldering gaze captivated audiences and whose legacy shaped generations of leading men. Yet even Valentino, the very definition of stardom in the 1920s, had a backstory that deviated sharply from the romantic fantasies projected onto the silver screen. Biographical accounts and decades of archival digging have unearthed persistent suggestions that, in his early years, Valentino survived by engaging in companionship work for wealthy patrons, often in exchange for meals, rent money, or introductions to producers. As an immigrant arriving in the United States with little money and few connections, Valentino found himself in a cutthroat entertainment scene where charm and good looks were the only currency he could reliably offer. Stories of his benefactors and his rumored associations with older affluent men were quietly circulated in studio back channels but never publicly acknowledged, largely due to the aggressive media control enforced by the film studios. Even after achieving superstardom, the residue of his early struggles clung to him, hidden behind studio-manufactured narratives and heteronormative PR campaigns. Valentino's early death at the age of 31 only intensified the mystique around his life, making it easier for Hollywood to canonize him as a tragic, misunderstood icon without confronting the deeper truths about what it took for him, and so many like him, to make it to the top. Valentino's legacy, therefore, is not just one of groundbreaking screen presence, but also of silent sacrifice. He stands as a pioneer not only in cinematic art, but in the unspoken history of how ambition, vulnerability, and desperation intersected in the making of Hollywood's first male superstar. Behind every polished smile and silver screen legend lies a story Hollywood never wanted you to hear. If this glimpse into the hidden lives of Tinseltown's leading men made you question the myths we've been sold, then don't stop here. Hit that like button, subscribe to Rewinding Legends, and ring the bell so you never miss a truth buried beneath the glitter. Because in this town, the juiciest stories aren't found in the spotlight, they're hiding in plain sight. Let's keep digging.